All right, everyone. Ready for a deep dive? Today, we are cracking open Seth Godin's All Marketers Are Liars.
Oh, a good one.
And don't worry, this isn't some expose on, corporate deception. It's about the stories we buy into every day, the narratives we tell ourselves about brands and products, even if, even if those stories aren't exactly the complete truth.
You're spot on. Godin basically says these these lies, or maybe we can call them simplified narratives, are just our brain's way of dealing with like an overwhelming amount of information out there.
So it's like our brains are constantly trying to make sense of everything by telling themselves stories.
Right. We're wired for patterns, for explanations, and marketers, well, they figure that out. Think back to when the iPod Shuffle first launched.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Some people were convinced theirs were broken because
Yeah.
they kept hearing the same songs pop up. And
Which makes sense if it's shuffled.
exactly. But they were missing the point of true randomness. They were imposing a narrative on how it should work.
So our existing beliefs, those really shape how we see the world.
Absolutely. Godin talks about those beliefs as our worldviews, right? Like a lens that colors everything we see.
Yeah.
Our upbringing, the experiences we have, our values, it all gets blended into this unique perspective.
Yeah.
And smart marketers, they figure out how to make their product's story click with a specific worldview. Like, think about those early Tom's of Maine toothpaste ads.
Okay, yeah.
They didn't just launch in, like, every supermarket, right? They went straight for health food stores, targeting a specific type of consumer.
People who already cared about natural ingredients and all that.
Exactly. They were already primed to believe that story.
And that seems key. It's not about just shouting your story to everyone. It's about finding the right ears.
100%.
Yeah.
Godin calls them influential niches, more specific than just your average target audience.
Yeah.
It's about shared beliefs and how those beliefs spread.
So it's like those early adopters who then tell everyone else.
Exactly. The organic food movement, that's a perfect example. Did organic foods suddenly get tastier overnight? Probably not, but the story it told, the narrative, that's what resonated.
Right, the whole idea of healthier, more ethical choices.
Exactly. That really took off.
Which brings us to framing. Basically, how you present an idea so it clicks with your audience's worldview.
You got it. Godin uses Fox News as an example. Now, putting politics aside, they really understood how to frame their message fair and balanced.
Right.
Immediately validated what their audience already believed.
Makes me think about, all the products now that slap organic on the label, even if it makes zero difference in quality.
It's not even the word itself. It's the feeling it evokes. It colors everything. It's like Blue Nile diamonds. They completely flip the script. You don't get the whole Tiffany's experience. They went for the savvy consumer who doesn't need all the pomp and circumstance.
So we're talking about stories that tap into deep-seated beliefs. But where's the liar part come in? Godin talks about fibs versus frauds. What's the difference?
It all boils down to intent. A fib, like those wine glasses that supposedly make wine taste better.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it might not be, scientifically proven, but...
But people enjoy the wine more.
Exactly. The experience is enhanced because they believe the story. A fraud is just straight-up deception.
So authenticity is what separates them. If the experience doesn't deliver, the whole thing falls apart.
You nailed it. Authenticity is key.
Yeah.
It's got to be the real deal. Like, picture this. Cold Stone Creamery with their whole singing scoopers thing.
Oh, yeah.
But you walk in and the employees are just miserable. Totally kills the vibe, right?
For sure. The story falls apart if it doesn't match up with what you experience. It makes you wonder, how much of what we experience as consumers is, carefully constructed? Like those travel agencies that always smell like coconut. Is that just to get us in the mood for a vacation?
Probably. Or those authentic ski lodge pubs with the, perfectly placed dust and old skis on the wall. Someone put a lot of thought into that. But here's the thing. It's not always about, tricking people. Good marketing, it taps into our desires, Think about those Banquet Crockpot Classics commercials. They get me every time.
Oh, man, those commercials. The whole idea of a home-cooked meal, even if it's, from a bag in the freezer.
Right. It just works.
Yeah.
But there's this whole other layer to this storytelling thing. Even if your story is amazing, how do you even get people to notice it in the first place? I mean, we're drowning in marketing messages every single day.
That's so true. So how do our brains even decide what to pay attention to?
Godin says we make guesses. We lean on our past experiences, those worldviews we were talking about, to filter all that information. And one thing that grabs our attention, change. Our brains are wired to notice what's new, what's different.
So a brand that can catch our eye with something novel, they've got a better shot at sticking with us.
Now that's the question, isn't it?
Yep.
We tend to think that first impressions are everything, that a brand needs a killer website or a catchy jingle. But Godin says it's not so simple. Think about it. How many brands do you interact with every day that you don't even remember?
Oh, tons. I see a million logos a day, but only a few stick out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we don't even register those first encounters. Godin's point is those first impressions, they aren't always formed right away. They solidify later on based on all those little interactions.
So it's less about nailing that one perfect moment and more about telling a consistent story, right? Across the board.
You got it. Like, take Kiehl's, the skincare brand. They've gone way beyond selling lotions. They've created a whole experience.
Oh, right. They have like a Ducati motorcycle in their stores. What does that have to do with face screen?
It's all part of the story. It reinforces their brand identity. They're selling an experience you won't get anywhere else.
It's like, it's not just what you say, it's what you do, too. The whole vibe needs to match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that loops back to authenticity. If you don't walk the walk, people can tell.
Right, like those miserable Cold Stone Creamery employees, that disconnect just screams inauthentic.
100%. So we know we need a good story. We know it's got to be authentic, and it has to resonate with the right people. But how do we actually reach those people through all the noise?
Right, even with the best intentions, it's easy to get lost.
And that's where understanding those worldviews is crucial. We're filtering everything through our own lens.
So it's not enough to just tell any good story. You have to tell it to the right people.
Bingo. And to do that, you need to know what they care about, their values, their worldview. Like, think about organic food again. It's not just about the food. It's about tapping into those values of health and sustainability.
And Whole Foods has that down pat. It's a whole lifestyle they're selling.
Exactly. And they've built an empire on it.
Okay, so you've identified your target audience, you get their worldview, but how do you make sure your message actually connects with them?
Godin calls it framing, presenting your idea in a way that aligns with your audience's existing beliefs. Like, you know how Lucky Charms cereal is all about the whole grains now?
It's still sugary cereal.
Right. But they found a way to make it appeal to health-conscious parents.
Clever. So they tapped into this desire for healthier choices, even if the product hasn't changed that much.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot where your message lines up with the audience's worldview.
Which can be tricky because we all see the world differently, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All our experiences, our values, our beliefs, they create our unique worldview.
And that worldview acts as a filter, right? It
Yeah.
shapes how we interpret everything.
Right. The stories we believe, the products we buy, it's true. One story, a million different interpretations, depending on who's listening.
It's like we've all got this internal BS detector, always on the lookout for something that just feels off.
I love that. And the more we know about our own worldview, the better that BS detector works.
Right. But how do we really get inside the heads of our audience?
Yeah, how do we figure out what makes them tick?
Exactly. Because anyone can say, know your audience, but it's a whole other thing to really get them.
But Godin talks a lot about research.
Oh, right. Like really digging into who they are.
Exactly. You can't just rely on assumptions.
Yeah.
You got to back it up with data, not just demographics, but like psychographics. What makes them tick emotionally?
So it's like becoming a cultural anthropologist, really immersing yourself in their world.
Exactly. And only then can you craft a story that truly resonates.
Because people want to share stories that feel real, right? Stories they connect with.
That's it. Think about brands like Tom's of Maine or Patagonia. Their whole reputation is built on their values.
Yeah, their commitment to doing good.
Right. It's not just marketing fluff. It's baked into everything they do.
And that authenticity, that's what makes their stories so believable. It's like they're selling a whole way of life.
Exactly. And people want in on that. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
We want to support brands that reflect our values.
100%. And that's where the magic happens. When you tap into that need for connection, that's when a story really takes off.
It's like that example Godin gives, the Jackson Diner, this little Indian place in Queens. It was a hidden gem, but then it got super popular.
And the quality went down because they couldn't keep up, but people still went back.
Because they had a story to tell, even if the food wasn't as good.
Exactly. The story became bigger than the experience itself.
That's wild. Okay, but it shows you the power of a good narrative, especially when it makes people feel like they're in on something together.
It does. But it brings up a challenge. How do you grow without losing that authenticity that got you there in the first place?
That's the question, isn't it? It's a tough balance to strike.
Godin uses the Soy Luck Club as an example, this tiny coffee shop that blew up. They had this unique vibe, and the more people shared their experiences, the bigger it got.
It's like they created a whole movement.
Totally. And it wasn't about forcing it on anyone. It was about finding their people, the ones who already connected with their message.
Yeah, sometimes those people are on the fringes, looking for something different.
Like Howard Stern fans. Remember how Sirius Satellite Radio built their whole model around it?
Oh, totally. They knew those fans were diehards.
It's a perfect example of how knowing your audience, understanding their story, can lead to wild success.
This has been mind-blowing. It makes you see marketing and storytelling in a whole new light.
Right. Godin really makes you question everything.
So, what's the big takeaway? What should our listeners remember from all this?
I think the most important thing is awareness. Be aware of the stories we're told, the narratives that shape how we see things.
And question everything.
Yes. Be a critical consumer of information.
Because ultimately, we decide what stories we believe.
We have that power.
This was a fantastic deep dive. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It was fun.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.